Lauren Hibbert is on her way. Oh, hey, Sean. Sean is coming in. Lauren Hibbert is on her way. She is at a meeting that's running a bit late. But I thought we would start just by going around and doing introductions because we have some new folks here. And I'm going to pass it over to Sean. Sean, would you just name and your role here? Because we have some new folks.
Yep. Yeah. Sean Sheehan, I'm the elections director here at Secretary of State's office.
And then I'm just going to go around what I have on here. I've got Megan O'Rourke at the top. Megan. Hi. Do you guys want to just say a little bit about your roles for everyone?
Can you hear me? Am I on?
Oh, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, great. Hi, I'm Megan.
Oh, wait, I'm going to actually pause and say,
that's okay.
Kelly, could you please start the recording?
Oh, I started it.
You did it?
Started.
Oh, great. Yep. So we are recording. Great. We got that going. Wonderful. So she is on it. Yep. All right. Now we're back on Megan. Go ahead, Megan.
I'm Megan. Yeah, Megan O'Rourke, and I work with CCTV Town Meeting Television in Burlington, Vermont, and I'm here as part of the Vermont Access Network.
And Andy?
Sure. Andy Hooper, 30 years in IT, 8 years Montpelier City Council, currently in my second term, Middlebury Select Board, a lot of experience on various municipal bodies. And delegate from VLCT to this committee.
Next I have Laura. Hi, welcome. We're just saying our names and a bit about our roles. Yeah.
I'm Laura Cushman. I'm an attorney at Disability Rights Vermont, and I am sort of the stand-in for Lindsay Owen, our executive director, when she's double booked on meetings and what have you. So I'm sitting in for Lindsay today from Disability Rights.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Kate.
Hi, everyone. Kate LaRose, she, her. I am with Vermont Center for Independent Living and was suggested to be at this meeting in the stead of the HRC. I am here primarily in the role of somebody who has not been able to vote due to inaccessibility for the last several years. And many of the peers that we work with have been unable to be civically engaged, sometimes ever, at local level. So yeah, just really excited to be here, to be part of this. I'm popping an image in the chat that just came to me sort of this morning. It's the famous Norman Rockwell Arlington Town Meeting Day from 1942, maybe. And one of the things that we had just found over and over again is when we talk about accessibility, and trying to support peers in getting access. A lot of what we are finding is a lot of select board members and sometimes town clerks were just experiencing and envisioning accessible meetings very differently than us. And so I very much look forward to co-designing and envisioning recommendations for what a third image of truly inclusive and accessible civic engagement looks like. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And next up here, I have Kelly.
Hello, I'm Kelly Payala. I'm the newest member of the Secretary of State's team, and I'm working under Jenny, and I'm kind of doing the tech stuff for the meetings here for you all now. So glad to be here.
Kelly. And Cynthia?
Hi, Cynthia Shelton. I'm in Thetford, Vermont, and I'm a member of the public, but I've also sat on various commissions and committees, and am a self-appointed watchdog and keeping people accountable type of person. And did a Thetford welcome manual to try to include new people into the roles, and also am currently trying to get the semi-quincentennial going, which I feel like is a democracy activity worth doing and is very much tied into what this committee is about.
Thank you. And Frank.
I'm a planning commission member at Paula and also energy coordinator. I have years of experience in computer integration at various levels with various operating systems. Also did stint in that business, financial services, various environmental groups. And that's just the shortened version of a CV. I have to say this is Andy holds rank here. He has a signed copy of a Bruce Schneer book.
All right, thanks, Frank. So I believe, yeah, so Kelly sent around the agenda yesterday. Hopefully you all have it, but I think the plan today was to pick up the universal design discussion that we passed over in past weeks with the hopes that Kate and Laura would have some input on that for the rest of the group. And then we have a 15-minute, just an update from the technical group that met once, I believe, in the interim here. And then rolling into our technical discussion, and I'm just pulling up our mandate here, is we have the best practices guide that we're working on, which includes the universal design piece. And then we are to identify the technical assistance, equipment, and training necessary for municipalities to run effective and inclusive, remote, and hybrid public meetings. So that is what we'll be rolling into for the rest of this meeting, talking about the different aspects of what municipalities are going to need here to really truly do this. And then at the end, we're hoping to just move into what our next discussion topics will be. We do have on the agenda for next month to continue working on this wrapping up the technical assistance piece and then moving into the accessibility guide for the polling and local meetings. And that's the next 2 weeks. After that, electronic participation and voting and annual meetings. So that's really going to be the bulk of our work for the next few weeks, is a lot of this technical stuff, and how we can use the tech supports to get us where we want to be with accessibility in both the spaces of public meetings, of public bodies, and meetings of the voters. So that's where we are and where we're headed. Does anybody have anything else to add right now? No? Okay, so we have on here a 45-minute discussion about universal design. Full disclosure, I know nothing about universal design as is. And I don't know what Lauren had planned for how to run that portion of the meeting. What I'm thinking is, does anybody, and I'm going to look at Laura and Kate, because you're the folks that we haven't asked this question of before in this meeting. Do you have any ability to sort of walk through the really high level of what we're trying to achieve when we're talking about universal design? Is that something that is a term that I know that can you write a book on that? But it's big, I know, and I think we have a group of folks here. We realized when we were talking about this for meetings past that we just did not have expertise in the room. So is that something either one of you feel comfortable speaking to? No.
I couldn't say anything more than what you probably already know, and I'm an attorney, and I
Yes.
am not. I don't understand technology or how technology is being changed and modified to assist folks more universally. So I'm not your girl, unfortunately.
Okay. And that's good information to have. How about you, Kate?
Yes, I was looking over at the attorney. I mean, one of the things that as advocates, we're always reminding folks of what's hard about universal design and beautiful is that there's no one size fits all approach, right? And so when you consider the ADA and the state laws surrounding accessibility, it doesn't say things have to be done this particular way, right? Although people will automatically go to curb cuts. Great, that's great. And I think so long as there's language that really does make it clear that universal design is what is universal. So if people are asking for something and saying that this is what I need access for based on my disability, then that is, that then that would be, so yeah, I don't know, writing a book on it, absolutely not. The attorney's saying no, so I would have deferred to the attorney. But yeah, I do have some folks at VCIL, if there's specific things that you would like, language suggestions that I could run past them.
That would be, I think, super helpful. I mean, so the statutory mandate here, we have this list of best practices, right? That we're supposed to come up with the best practices, recommend best practices. We're envisioning that in the best case scenario, if there is time, producing some sort of best practices guide, right? That would be then shareable and useful. If we can't get that far in time for this report, we would hope that what we could do is present information that could then be rolled into a future best practices guide that could be made usable. But we have the list of things that we are to recommend best practices on. And one of those things is the use of universal design for annual meetings and the meetings of public bodies. And it's that broad.
Is there a definition?
Not in statute here. I mean, I'm sure that there is like some, general definitions that are floating around out there in the universe, but I mean, it is a term of art.
Can you pull up
But I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want.
pull it up on a screen and maybe we can get a little idea because I'm confused on it myself.
Can
I
I,
wonder,
can I
go
say
ahead.
something?
Yeah, please do.
I have a whole list that people have given me that their towns have claimed undue hardship on. And so this is sort of a back end way to go into, like, I'm happy to share the list that disabled folks have said, hey, here's all the reasons why towns have claimed undue hardship. And if we design proactively for that, that might be at least an initial checklist that could be useful.
Yes. That would be extremely useful. Is that something you have handy?
Yes, let me go pull it.
Lovely.
I think
Thank
one
you.
of the things, I guess we're just, I tried raising my hand. I can wait.
No, go right ahead. I think we're at least at the point I think where people can jump in and we'll start hand raising if we have to, but go ahead.
I think one of the things, and maybe people all understand this, is that you're trying to make something that you're trying to give best practices that don't require someone requesting or asking for something to happen that's not built in. And one example could be, for example, captioning, right? Setting up your Zoom meeting to automatically allow for and to have captioning turned on. And that, I think we all know and have experienced that captioning is useful for folks with limited hearing, with no hearing, with ADHD, with problems with focusing, with, and captioning is an example of something that can be recommended as a universal design element that someone should not have to request. And then somebody figures out, how to turn it on. And, this has been my experience as I've been in a meeting where we started the meeting and then captioning wasn't already set and you had to restart the meeting to get captioning going because somebody asked for it. So, and I think there might be other examples like that we could, I think the ADA says that also, doors have to be a certain width. You don't have to ask for a door to be a certain width. We've learned that. And certainly, I'm sure there are still communities and town halls that don't have doors that are the right width, but there may be other things along those lines.
So an element, I mean, as a baseline is providing what is needed to large constituencies for various reasons without having to be an opt-in, ask for kind of not service, but so a request is not necessary. You're trying to identify what things you can proactively provide that have universal use to lots of people for lots of reasons. It's okay. That was the sense I had of it. Do we know whether there is to not reinvent the wheel, right? Whether there is something either Vermont specific or perhaps more nationally that is like that sets forth universal design principles that we could be working from? Is anyone familiar with anything like that?
Some boilerplate.
Well, yeah, or I'm just thinking like, is there, Vermont specific would be great, but if it's not, if there is some sort of,
Is there any case law around it?
oh, I'm sure. But I mean, I'm not gonna go straight to case law, I think.
No.
I'm thinking, these are because ideally what we're gonna be saying is, I'm sure, like, these are the elements of universal design that we really think everyone should be hitting on for annual meetings for these public bodies. These are the ones that are ideal, but perhaps we need XYZ resources, and then that rolls us into the technological resources piece.
Yeah.
But yes, I think a question there is what, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, in response to your question, there are, sort of recommendations for universal design for things like education and learning, for different disabilities. I mean, there's certainly, we don't need to reinvent the wheel to figure out what some of those are. We might just need to make additions and adjustments for the specific purpose of public meetings and people's access to voting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a sense of what entities would be good places to look for those sort of models? Like stuff like education. I'm imagining. I'm not even sure. Like what group might be putting forth such a guide for, say, education matters.
Andy just put a useful link in the chat about from the Universal Design Project. That seems pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
a good place to start.
Yeah, it's one above.
Is that mainly around housing, or is that meetings? I can't click on the link for some reason, but
see if I can.
Yeah.
There's a University of Washington one. You would see that one in the search.
I mean, I'm sure. So, here we go. Yeah, so Andy's got a link here. Like, what is universal design?
Concerns. Yeah.
The Universal Design Project. Cool. So there is a universaldesign.org out there, and it talks about design that is usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation and specialized design. Okay, so that is a good place to start. It looks like Cynthia put one in the chat as well. So we will, I think one starting place here, I think, is to compile these resources and look and see what we can find, and then perhaps bring it back to the greater group. I wonder if we want to talk about some of these specifics that if we can think of other things like the closed captioning option that off the top of our heads that are pieces where either where there's a problem that we should be looking for a solution, or where there's a solution that we're aware of that more people should be, or more groups should be using. And I think.
And is our goal to make some best practices, or to make some?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nope, that's fine.
Our goal is to recommend best practices for the use of universal design for both public body meetings and annual meetings, which is going to be slightly different, obviously, because the usage is different. Go ahead, Fred.
And this probably is advisory for the legislature, so you can provide options, different scenarios, I would imagine.
Well, yes. So the specified statutory duty is recommend best practices for. There's a list of 4: running effective inclusive meetings, maximizing participation, accessibility, and that electronic hybrid. So accessible, effective, inclusive meetings. Then that's 1, universal design. is 2. Trainings for open meeting law compliance is 3. And then recording of meetings and the means and timeline for posting those recordings, which we've sort of thought about as a subset really of the running effective and inclusive meetings. And the training really somewhat too. I think the universal design is a very separate piece, but those other 3 kind of roll into each other a bit more. I just lost my direction here for a minute. So while we're thinking about, did you find your list, Kate? Do you have it handy? I'm just thinking about the questions that people have brought to you, the problems.
Because I'm trying to listen and read everything, but I will go back and look for it.
That's fine. That's fine. I see. And I'm also failing at multitasking because I did that's in the chat and I missed it. But yeah, so this universal design project that Andy posted the link to talks about 24 categories of access. Let me find up here. And I think.
And Laura has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Laura.
I just want to caution that, we can select 50 different types of universal design methods, and there will still be people who are going to fall through those cracks because there are folks who are deaf or hard of hearing who, don't use American Sign Language or can't read. So, maybe they used, cued translation or there are many different ways to do interpretation for deaf people, not just American Sign Language is what my point is simply that I think we can make an exhaustive list of recommendations about universal design things that need to be added, but we'll also need to include a provision that says for anybody who is still doesn't have accessibility with all of this in place, that there's another method and way for them to request access. Maybe it'll be a small number of people that we can't cover with those universal design recommendations, but there will be people who even those universal design attempts aren't going to serve.
And I think that's a really strong point. So we need to make sure that we're very clear in here that when we're talking about recommendations for best practices, that there are limitations on what you can achieve with those best practices, and you're going to need other means of making sure that everybody that everybody's able to get access. You're not going to be able to do it all. Yes, Frank?
Yeah, I'm in one for the Washington EDU, and they're talking about accommodation. So I'm wondering statute-wise if there's a request that for an accommodation that's as opposed to having everything available everywhere across the state, no matter the size of the town, that they would be ready for something for all the contingencies that arrive.
So the public meetings are by statute under the open meeting law bound by public accommodations law, right?
Period.
So we have other bodies of outside law that compel any entity that holds a public meeting, so towns or the state, to be in compliance with public accommodations law. And I only have a very high level view of how those requests work. I mean, there's that is a request, and then whether or not the entity has to provide what's requested is defined in law and plays out in law.
I think that's the crux of the question.
Right.
Isn't that the crux of the question?
Well, and I think I would, to me, as a lawyer, I would say that's the last resort, right? That if someone's going to have to invoke, like the idea here, I think, is to try to being proactively setting people up to succeed instead of having people have to threaten a lawsuit to be able to get what they need to be able to participate, right?
Well, in the case of a meeting law, the way there's a criminal aspect to it if you don't do it right. So where does that fit in? If you're not doing it right, does it fall under the criminal complaint? category.
So if someone files an open meeting law complaint and you, a public body, are held as having violated the open meeting law, there is the civil element, which a court could say you have to undo something or void an act or redo an act, or an injunction, stop doing this, right? Or there is a possible way that a court could hold someone criminally accountable for violating the open meeting law. That's not going to fix someone's underlying accessibility issue, though. That's gonna compel the board. The criminal, that's a penalty, right? Someone's going to pay a penalty, but that's not going to actually fix the problem.
And maybe you have something on your record.
Well, sure. And I think what we're trying to focus on, I think, here is that there are these other, penalties for violating public accommodations laws as well. And if you step back from that, there are standards in statute that are the bare minimum that are legally required for public bodies and other public government affiliated entities, right, to follow. So we have this in law. There's a bare minimum standard. And I think what we're trying to flesh out is best practices, which is, I think, probably something that's going to go beyond the bare minimum that's in the law. And perhaps we're making recommendations for what the legislature ought to be doing to modify the law, right? Perhaps we're making recommendations for just practically speaking, practices for what public bodies should be doing.
Which falls back to what Kate was saying, why the towns were declaring undue hardship, possibly.
Yeah, Jenny, I share a little bit of Frank's concerns, right? If a town goes to provide accessibility features for folks with hearing issues, but the only person in that town does not speak ASL, and the town invests in ASL services because they think that that's the best practices, that is a whole lot of effort and expense that doesn't actually address any of the needs of that community.
But isn't there a different way of recommending that approach? Isn't there
and I see Kate's hand, and I also see Laura's, and I'm not sure who had it up first.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, good.
So I think, to think that there would be only one person who is in a town who is deaf or hard of hearing, considering how we are all aging, and the Gen Xers who used lots of headphones and went to very loud concerts are going to be aging and going to have more hearing loss. Then, I think to say that there would only be one person in a town who would need captioning or any kind of universal design to be able to hear a meeting is super minimizing the number of people who need accessibility as a consideration. But also, I would just say that we're not just looking at hearing impaired, we're looking at people who are homebound, who have been told by their open meeting clerks and officers that you've got to get to the building. We're not driving a ballot to your house. So you can't attend a public meeting or vote on this issue unless you can get to the building. So what do we do for those people who are homebound, disabled and homebound, who can't, homebound is maybe not the most politically correct term to use, but they can't leave their homes. They're so disabled that they can't get into a car and drive to the facility. There are lots and lots. I mean, the issue of disability is, so expansive. And, so I don't want to minimize just by saying it's an
Laura,
awful
I
lot
wasn't
of
talking about a whole
expense.
community at a town meeting necessarily. I was talking about a regional planning commission meeting that maybe has 2 members of the public at a given meeting. Right there's a vast range in the audiences and the interest in the groups that are covered by this law.
Right, but we're going to create laws that cover all of them, right? So we're looking at the public meetings, all open meetings, and the small meetings. And so, my point is just that it's got to be more comprehensive than, just considering a few disabilities, a few types of disabilities.
So Kate's had her hand up for a while here, so I'm gonna call on Kate.
Thank you. So yeah, just reading through the Act 133 again, like I wonder if, so I even cringe a little bit thinking about best practices for universal design, because it like, yes, and there's a certain minimum things that like minimum recommendations that could be made just because like by virtue of it's the year 2025 and this is how business is done, right? So like, number one, all towns should have a website, because if they don't have a website, which many have decided intentionally not to do, which are free, they don't have to post their meeting minutes. And it is not an accident that they don't have a website. It's because nobody has said they have to have a website and they don't want to be transparent or accountable, right? So like, that's not a disability thing, that's an everyone thing. Like there needs to be a website so people can easily get meeting minutes, so people can see when meetings are posted, when meetings are held. Because if you don't have that to start with, in addition to the other ways of posting meetings, and things like that, like it's already not working for most people, right? So like there's the bare minimum recommendations of this is what should be done just by virtue of this is the way we want to do things in Vermont, so that everyone's included. And then when I think about best practices, I mean, I almost think the best practices are really about hitting upon the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of people that are able to gatekeep, maybe not intentionally, maybe intentionally, I don't know, about being able to identify the spirit of a request for access. Because I'm hearing time and time again from people that I work with that that the people that they reach out to and ask very clearly to me as an ADA request was not received as such. And so they were denied. And so I think that a lot can be done around best practices of how being able to not just identify what a member of the public asking for access looks like, sounds like, but also just that other piece of like the attitude of, hey, we want everyone to be involved and that is our goal. So how do we help everyone be involved?
Yeah, so Frank's up.
Interesting curveball here is there's a fellow that lives down the street who works for Homeland Security. Guess what he does? He goes around to set up for disabled people access to electronic systems, etc. Right? Because there's so much of it now that's in that direction. And so anybody who would be disabled, who would be wanting to get on a Zoom meeting or get onto whatever it is possibly going to also have the same challenges to get other electronic, community access organizations. So maybe there's some sort of a centralized organization that multiple organizations can rely on, including the towns, where people are identified as needing this access, not only for the town meetings, but for others, that same equipment would be able to be used. And so jointly you'd be killing off a whole bunch of things with one stone, just as a suggestion.
And I wanna just call on Cynthia because your hand was up and it's not now. Is someone at the door? Is that Lauren? Maybe. Cynthia, did you have something you wanted to share or bring up?
I did. I was trying to figure out how to put it in the chat, but it's too weird. So is there any way for towns to find out through some kind of a census or survey what kinds of disabilities are in their area that could be anonymous, but just so that they know which of the buffet of options that they really need to address proactively? Do you know what I mean? So that there are so many, and not every town is going to have them, as has been said. So like we have people who are deaf, and I offered to live type our town meeting, and that was rejected out of hand. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to survey with HIPAA rules and all the rest that they could ask, that towns could be aware of who's in their community who has disabilities to pay attention to.
And select board members who are elected could be a disabled person who would be able to particularly access the meeting in a normal way as well, we're not only talking about the public, but we're also talking about people who would run for office, who can't be excluded for running for office because they're disabled with said disability.
And I do just want to say when I'm hearing this, that I'm hearing this, like, I think we want to stay away from thinking about there's a normal way and one other way or other ways, you know, I mean, or that there's a segment of the population. I mean, that we are divided into people who the system is serving and people who it's not, because I think the whole point of the universal design discussion, right, is that we can find elements that will serve everybody and that will actually include those people who are not being served, but will also benefit everyone for a lot of different reasons.
I agree, but
I
I know that our group is going
ahead.
to say that it's burdensome. That's what our town is going to say to a whole list of things. They can't hardly even deal with the chat during the meeting, let alone remember to put on the closed captioning. I agree, though.
Megan's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you know, sort of along what you were, I think, heading towards, Jenny, is it sounds like, you know, even just based on this conversation in this group of folks, that some of the best practices may need to dial back to the beginning of, like, you know, there may need to be some training provided by the state, and maybe part of this report is that it's very clear that some training needs to be provided to municipalities, you know, with the Vermont League of Cities of Towns, or with, you know, unfortunately, what's the organization that just closed? You know, they're, you know, with folks for communities around how to think about universal design, and that we really encourage folks to think of accessibility as an opportunity for greater involvement, not only for folks with specialized or specific disabilities, but for everyone involved. And, you know, the captioning can be an example of that. Sometimes people understand that. There is the use of the universal request symbol. You know, that's something that we've done, which is, again, is kind of has been taught to us as a best practice whenever we have an event or we have something that we're publicizing, to put the universal request symbol and have someone available, and then to maintain, and maybe this is again along what Frank is saying, that the state provides some accessibility supports, which does not happen now. You know, this dovetails with a request by Senator Gulick to create the Office of Refugees and Immigrants around language access. You know, there are things that people are doing that we can support with our recommendations to say, is there a place that the state can go? I mean, is there a place where a municipality can go to, say, find a bank of translators, to find a bank of folks who speak either American Sign Language or British Sign Language, or, right? So that when you do have a request, the turnaround time does not feel burdensome.
And Laura?
So I just wanted to address the, like, asking people to fill out a survey regarding what disabilities they have. You know, we can't ask people for their private medical information, and to what benefit would that be? So now a town knows that they have 5 people with developmental disabilities and 3 people with hearing impairment, and so then they're creating specific accommodations to deal with those specific disabilities. That's contrary to what we're being asked to do, which is to create a universal design. So I would just say that, like, I don't know that there would be much benefit in identifying how many disabled people live in each municipality, just because we're not trying to just deal with those specific issues. And I think, as Kate mentioned in the comments, like, it changes from day to day. disability is a thing that touches everybody, and it's one category of a class of people that changes regularly because every single one of us could become disabled at some point in our lives. It's not like other disabilities that you're born with, and that's just the way that your life is going to be. I mean, a car accident could change anything for any of us, and so that number is going to constantly be changing. So trying to identify a class of people in the here and now in order to create rules and laws that are going to be long standing on the books, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do.
I think I'm gonna suggest that I'm having trouble keeping up with the chat that is very substantive as well as the conversation. And I think there's a lot of important stuff happening in the chat over there. That is not, so I guess my request is let's use the chat for resource links, but let's try to actually have the substantive conversation. If we can pull that back in to the verbal, if that's doable for people. And I'm also a little nervous about not nervous. I want to make sure that our record, the recording is posted. I'm sure we can capture this chat somewhere, but I think it's really important that we also capture that and save that. But maybe we could try to have a little bit more cohesive conversation. And it sounds like, we're talking about this tension, right? There's this tension between trying to figure out a way to support everyone in a big picture way and include everyone, which is impossible without adjustments for everybody's own individual circumstances. And then there's the resource tension, right? With, and I think we're speaking to the learning curve, right? That not everybody is at the same place in terms of understanding. I had not heard the term universal design before this group. And I am, I was a legal aid attorney, not in the disability law project, mind you. And I was not a practicing attorney when I was at legal aid. Let's be clear about that. So I am an attorney who has worked for legal aid. And that was a new term for me. So not everyone's at the same place when they're coming to this, and a lot of well-meaning people are going to be concerned about making mistakes, concerned about ways of talking about these things. And I think finding a way to start at the beginning, like Megan was saying, is going to be really most useful, especially for putting something out there for public use as well as legislative recommendations. Does that sort of summarize, I think, where we're at? Okay. Yes, Megan.
One of the things, just if it's useful to you, that Lauren was doing was just reading the chat so that it was part of the public record.
So we can do that. Let me pull it up here. Let's see. So what we have in the chat of substantive, we have Kate's list. We have, let's see, okay, so we have from Kate, some of universal design can also be practices and procedures. For example, a Waterbury resident was denied curbside voting this year because the town official was not familiar with the laws. So refresher training, reminder checklists for town clerks to review with election officials the month before and day before town meetings would be universal design. Then we have some more guidelines from Cynthia. Kate's noted that legal aid's CAP program, is that the Consumer Assistance Program? Okay, yeah. As links to resources they frequently use. And that's affiliated also with the Attorney General's office for universal design and printed materials. So we should be looking there. And then Kate says disability is dynamic and what's true today may not be true tomorrow. And even with one individual, what is needed as an accommodation today might be different tomorrow. And then Laura said, yes, that's ableism, exactly what we're trying to avoid. And I think that's like starting with a normal and then moving to like what's not normal, as opposed to thinking about the whole like scope, and starting from the full landscape.
Yes.
Yeah. And Laura also mentioned at the beginning, and this is Andy, which I thought I was adding to, that no level of foreseeable accommodations will enable every person to engage at the level they want to without specific practices. I'm honestly confused. Do you want to say any more about that, Andy, at this point? Or do you think we moved on? Or would you like, do you want to add to that?
I think it's really tough to design in a way that gives everyone as much engagement as they could want without them asking. And the thing that we heard, that like none of these practices will necessarily meet that goal. And so if it's a balancing test, and really what we need to do is say, you should always be captioning. You should make hearing devices available if you've got a meeting and you expect a greater population than this. If we can boil this down to a set of practices, that's great. But I think the idea that we can meet everyone where they are without knowing where they are, it makes my head get a little explodey.
Then I think Frank had his hand up.
Yeah. As far as undue hardship is concerned, that is with the Vermont State Open Meeting Law. However, the Americans with Disability Act, as Laura may be able to testify to, is always expanding in the case law to also include those in the autism spectrum in some cases. All right, so you have a civil problem here, which there was somebody running around. We had an office, and we put out a handicap ramp and had the door sizes. Not everybody did, but there was actually some people running around seeing what places did not have handicap access, hunting for a civil case location that I experienced in my past. And I met these people, and that's what they were doing. They were going from village to village to village, looking for people that didn't have handicap access in order to engage with a civil action. I thought that was interesting, hunting for some cases. So you have that. And one of the things that technology-wise that we have to answer some of our questions that I mentioned that put in the spreadsheet, Megan, was everybody has these cell phones these days. And if they can come into a meeting like we're doing here virtually with the hearing devices attached to the cell phone, they would be very well able to audit the meeting without having hearing devices, or having hearing devices that would be readily available, that would be like those types of devices. So I think that we can get past this, but the requirement that it has to be done is something we were trying to deal with inclusive factor, is we're not excluding. And so the question really is if the state wants to set up a statute where accommodation would have to be pre-requested, and if that would be legal, then every town would be then able to know ahead of time. And then if they didn't accommodate at that point in time, then they could run into like needing more education. You know, you don't want to take people to court. And if the state were helping financially and with a centralized organization to do this, then it's a no-brainer that it can be plugged in, because the town folk aren't going to be dealing with the complexity of. There's people that don't even know how to put up a website, as Kate might know as well. They just may get PSTD and thought of it. So I think that I just rambled a little bit, but I think that there's tools available to solve all the problems.
So Kate's got her hand up.
Thank you. So I think this is a question with a statement, but there's still a question at the start. So in reading through Act 133's charges, my understanding is that we are talking about accessibility, transparency, and accountability in local municipal goings on, not for a protected class of people, but for all people, right? And so it doesn't seem useful to really, like, ostensibly, like, disabled people have civil rights in this matter, right? Except we know that like basically no, because the de facto is that you're going to have to like just do a lot of work as a disabled person. At the end of the day, you're still not going to get what you need to have access to meetings, and you're going to be universally hated in your town, you know? So like, I don't think it's, in this particular case, I don't know that it's actually useful to think about universal design in the framing of people with disabilities, because think about, for example, the towns who have spent a lot of money to install elevators. Are those elevators ever turned on? Do they know where the locks are for the doors? No. But it's not just people with wheelchairs who should have access to that. It's the mom with the stroller, right? And so like, if we can think about this as access for all, I think it's going, if in fact the accessibility, transparency, and accountability in Act 133's charge is for everyone, because like captions, for example, like you shouldn't have to have any sort of diagnosis to be able to request captions. Like I might be a parent holding a sleeping baby in my arms and want to be able to engage in the meeting and still get access to captions without being told no.
John?
Yeah, I like, I think you have some real good points there, Kate, and thinking about broadly for everyone. My mind's been sticking back with those questions about, I think what popped up, I think Cynthia or maybe Andy has too, with the surveys. And my thought is, for the survey, if it was framed not around, are you a person with a disability, or what disabilities do you have, or what do you need, but more an assessment of whether people know about the town's meetings, whether they feel welcome, whether they feel accessible, things like that. I think you'll get a broader swath at what's preventing there from being the attendance. It could be the time of day, it could be that people are busy, it could be a whole slew of things. And I think that gives you something that you can have that metric to kind of try to build on and have improvement going forward. And it's not kind of focusing on the disability part, but more on what the solutions are. And then I think it sort of feeds into the point that some folks have been saying about kind of having the menu. I mean, you're having that broader mindset of here's things we should always have, but also we know we have in our toolkit things we could pull upon if we're hearing that meetings aren't as welcoming, inclusive, getting as high participation, whatever the case may be, but not kind of going right to everything that wouldn't have you. So I'm thinking like in the elections space, we have the accessible voting machines that every municipality has, and we send trainers there to set them up. And I think as Laura and Kate know well, a lot of clerks feel frustration with them because the majority of the towns spend all the time kind of setting it up, and no one comes to vote and have the sense of, okay, we did all this work for nothing. But it's really shifting that frame to what are we, are people feeling like they can vote? Are they accessible? Maybe that doesn't work for them. I think as Kate mentioned before too, it's the need, they need to come, they're homebound to bring, I think actually Laura, you're saying the homebound, to bring the ballot to them. That's shifting from meetings, but I think that broader kind of perspective.
I got a question for Sean. The state is requiring this accessibility for voting. Voting is controlled by the states. Is there any overlays that the ADA has federally which governs this as well that you have to follow and take under consideration other than just what the state wants to do? And the access issue.
Yeah, as far as the state controlling the voting, in Vermont, actually elections are administered locally.
Right.
So they're administered locally, but there are requirements.
Also ADA.
Exactly, yeah. So there are accessibility requirements, and there are election requirements at the federal level. There's federal law that localities have to adhere to. And yes, there's also state law, state statutes that they have to adhere to as well, in pieces that support. So
I'm wondering if the states the federal feds have cooked something up already in regards to this, which we may fall under the umbrella of, and we haven't asked that question yet.
I see Laura's hand up.
I haven't been to all of these meetings, and so this may have already been covered, and you may already have a list. But would it be helpful to start with a list of the barriers to accessibility and transparency and accountability that we're being asked to eliminate or address. Do we even know what I mean? I think we all can think of examples, right, of accessibility or transparency barriers that we've heard of or we've encountered ourselves in dealing with our open meetings, but it might help us focus the discussion about, I mean, obviously we're looking for a universal design to deal with all of it. So
So in previous meetings, the short answer is we have a list insofar as we have, in some places we've talked about that specifically and kept it. We also have documents that people have been contributing, and we're compiling those here at the Secretary of State's office. So if you have a list or want to make a list, or if anybody has not done that and wishes they would and thinks that they have things that we haven't hit on or maybe should hit on harder, I welcome it. Sending anything to me and to Lauren, and we're working on compiling all of that and trying to the next goal we have in-house, really me, is to try to streamline all the conversations we've had so far into like an outline of a document that would answer the first couple of questions that we've talked about. And so we do have some of that. I don't think it's nearly comprehensive, but it's a start anyway. Yes, Frank.
I just emailed you something and I'll tell the rest of the group. It's an official website of the United States government, GSA section 508.gov. And it is titled Create Accessible Meetings. And it has a whole bunch of like policy and management, content creation, design, development, acquisition, testing, training, tools, and events. So if the feds are already coming down with this, if this is something we're also have to follow, no matter if you're state or not, then that's something that we might model after.
It's like making sure that we're staying within legal bounds and
federally.
Yeah, yes.
Because then that removes lawsuit potential. If we're addressing that need properly, then some people are going around hunting for cases to sue on if the feds are requiring it nationwide.
And then Kate.
Thanks. Perhaps this has already been shared in previous meetings, but I want to just name this concept of people like hunting for civil rights violations is like not really a thing, because it's not necessary to hunt. Every disabled person I know has had civil rights violations, right? And I have at least in the peers that I work with at BCIL, I know 20 people, 20 different towns who have been denied access to public meetings in the last year. Some of them very rudely. So there's not the need. I don't think we should be afraid of this concept of hunting for civil rights violations, because they're there in every single town. And just by virtue of the fact that how many towns is it right now? 175 that do floor voting for public options, local elected officials or budgets. Just by virtue of that already, 173 at least are systemically excluding people. So. And we have our federal laws. We also have our state laws that protect the rights of people with disabilities. And those are laws are great. Laws are only as great as the enforcement mechanisms. The enforcement mechanisms are horrible. And the people and the organizations that are able to do the 3 and 4 and 5 year fights, lawsuits are not fun. They're awful. Actually, they're really awful and very expensive. And they never get they don't really result in what people basic rights at the end of it. Those organizations are also being defunded left and right. So I really do want to push back that in my understanding of Act 133 is not about access, accountability, and transparency for disabled people. It is for anyone in Vermont that wants access. And so if that means that I am a town voter, registered voter in Arlington, but I want access to a town meeting let's pick one, Sheffield, why not, right? Because it's an issue that I care about. So why, I really want to push back from that. And I'm sorry, just from doing this work and living this, hearing this concept of this group of people that are going out trying to figure out, make something that doesn't exist be there. It exists everywhere. I want to start with that. There's inaccessibility in every town in the state always.
So
Real
is it, I'm gonna,
quick,
this is, I'm mindful that we need to move to our next level in the agenda. So very quickly, Frank.
real quick. So what you're stipulating is basically it's statewide. It's not a municipality with a citizen issue, that any citizen statewide should be able to attend any town's meeting statewide, even though they're not a resident of that town, essentially. Is that what you, did I just hear that you say that, Kate?
Yeah, I wouldn't know why not, right? Like why, if we want to be accessible, why don't we want to be accessible, right? Accessibility is accessibility. And so this concept of people pushing back that elections, that something would be expensive or something would be hard, guess what? Elections and democracy is hard. Elections and democracy are expensive. That's how it is. So this isn't a separate thing, right? Like this is all part of the thing. This is the cost of elections. This is the cost of civic engagement.
I think it's, I'm going to move on from there right now, just because I am mindful of the rest of things we want to talk about. So I think, well said, Kate. I also think the next steps on this is going to be, I maybe compiling the framework. Maybe what I will try to do is draft just a combination of the framework we're going to try to use, not the actual, not elements of universal design per se, but how we want to be looking at this, right? And I think, and I have been trying to sort of jot down those touch points and tensions that we've all been hitting on through this conversation. So well, I'll set that one aside. I do think we should come back to it. I mean, I know we are going to come back to it. I'm thinking maybe next week we will add that.
Next meeting.
Excuse me, next meeting. Add that back in as a, sort of a follow-up and next steps on that piece, as well as the best practices for the other parts that are more open meeting law specific. So the next topic that we're trying to hit on for this report is the topic of, I'm going to get it up here, the technical, here it is. It's the technical assistance, equipment, and training necessary for municipalities, and this is zeroing in on municipalities, the rest of the report isn't necessarily, to run effective and inclusive remote and hybrid public meetings. So technical assistance, equipment, training, those are the three elements. And for the next agenda item we had here was just to try to get a quick update from the small group that was meeting to sort of discuss this on the side. And I can't remember who all was participating in that discussion, but does anybody just want to summarize how that conversation went? I'm seeing Susan nodding.
I'm hoping Megan is going to step up.
Sure.
Yeah, Megan.
Sure. I had my notes. I had my notes up in here.
Okay.
Just to give you a quick overview, Susan, myself, Andy Hooper, and Frank met on May 30th, and what we had sort of self-decided was to come up with some technical needs for hybrid meetings and to really focus specifically on that, and to set aside archiving and town meetings for future conversations. And this is technical needs for hybrid meetings for local public bodies, municipalities. We met and began to kind of outline some options and realized that, of course, things get complicated quickly. And then Susan and I met again on June 5th, yesterday, to outline some of the kind of goals of why we would want to support either the best practices around hybrid access to municipal meetings. That would be, current and ongoing concerns with hybrid access to municipal meetings, the trade-offs, sort of acknowledging the trade-offs, the pluses and minuses around hybrid meetings. This would tie back to the conversation that we were just having with accessibility. And then what do we need, regardless of whether this group is going to recommend legislation or not? What would be the best practices for hybrid access to municipal meetings? We do have a list designed and developed that I'm happy to share with folks, which is some hybrid setup meeting options, from the simplest setup of a phone in and what the pluses and minuses are on that, to an in-house built-in setup. And our goal is to come up with some price points so that if we are going to request or recommend as part of our working group a grant, that there's some sort of drive behind that, some logical drive behind that grant recommendation. And if you wanted to let me share my screen for a minute, I could share the notes with
That
folks.
sounds wonderful. Yes. And if you could also send that to me and or Lauren after. But yes, please, I would love you to. Do I have to give you permission to do that? Let me figure out.
Didn't seem to.
Okay.
I don't know
Okay.
what you see now. Do you see anything?
We do. That's much clearer now. Yeah.
So again, breaking this into two places, there's the goals, right? And so this area here where you see areas for discussion and reporting back to the legislature might be places that we just have a conversation amongst ourselves around these three main buckets. And then we have come up with some hybrid meeting setup options. This graphic is not to be used. It's just an example of a kind of graphic that we may want to present if we were to do that. Again, I'm not sure what this group, what we want in a final report. If we want something as simple as a friendly, what do you call this? A friendly kind of infographic, or if we want some more detailed, like on the left.
Sorry, accessibility.
Megan, I think that's awesome.
I'm not sorry. Accessibility request. Can this be sent out? I didn't get a copy of it, and the scrolling and the size of it is really. Thank you.
Absolutely, and just Kate, I don't think you were here at the last meeting. I asked Jenny and Lauren for permission to meet as a small subgroup to have some preparation so we could come with some preparation. So I'll copy that and post it right in the chat right now. And let me know immediately if sharing option, it should be public to anyone on the web. So
I'm requesting access.
Okay.
I have to.
All right. So you'll have to give me a minute to remember where that is on here. Oh, here it is, sharing. It was not, so anybody on the web, anyone with the link can be a viewer or a commenter, and then we're done. And I will just give a nod to Frank that, like, I apologize to all of you for bringing you into the Google verse. If I could break up with Google today, I would, but we have been in a long-term relationship, and it is
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
It's incestual. It's even worse.
Yeah. So here, there are some questions. I'm not sure how you want to approach this. We do have some questions for the working group, which may not be where we want to start.
I'm wondering, do we just want to walk through? So I see here in the second page, you've got the hybrid setting options, but can you scroll to the top to the beginning of your, or is that, yeah. So I'm wondering if we just want to
go through these discussion areas.
I'm thinking we want to go through these and then we can get to the questions. I love that you put this together. Thank you so much.
And Andy or Susan or Frank, if there's anything that you want to Great. Would you like me to continue? Would folks like me to continue sharing this document, or would you like to open it on your own?
Let's continue sharing it. Frank, did you have a comment?
Yeah, the point is we're looking at generic hybrid meetings for the open meeting. And I think we have three classes of viewers here. We have your TV, CCTV viewers, who's Megan is the CCTV viewer a interactive viewer who participates in the meeting, or just watching the meeting?
For me, hybrid meeting means that those who are joining virtually and those who are in the room participate in the meeting on a equal or egalitarian footing according to the roles that they take. So if they're a select board member and they're virtual, they are participating as if they're sitting in the room. And if they are a member of the public, they're participating according to their role as if they are sitting in the room. So that's, to me, the word hybrid means that you have an ability to be in the room or online. And in this case, it might be over the phone, or it might be on Zoom or Google Meet, some virtual platform. But just a live stream of a meeting, I do not consider hybrid. Watching a meeting at the end on, say, a YouTube live stream or some other live stream is just viewing a meeting. It's not participation.
That's great clarification. And I'd like to see this divided into two sections as we think about it. Is we have the open meeting, select board, the public's there, everybody, and you have engagement, and it's open and it's democracy in action. You do have that aspect of the meeting, but there's another aspect of the meeting where the meeting, and you know where I'm going with this, where the members, the select board would be going potentially into an executive session. And that executive session then has to operate also accordingly to the intent of the executive session from a privacy and security perspective, where it's black and white, because you don't have a gray area where your public can maybe be participating in some capacity in an executive session. It's no public involved.
Sure. So the public, the executive session is a closed portion of an open meeting, and so the hybrid element would apply. The statutory requirements for hybrid and the recommendations, as I understand them, generally address only the open portion of public meetings. And I think, I'm not sure that this is where we need to drill down on that, but I do think there probably is a place for a discussion about the use of technology and inclusion in executive session for board members. I'm not sure that this is necessarily where we're gonna pick that up. But that is a separate place, because of course this is going to mean if you're gonna have a hybrid meeting, you are going to have members in that executive session who are attending from various locations as well. So
there may be a higher bar technology wise as well than just a regular meeting.
So noted on that point. So let's see, I'm looking through here. I'm seeing your the areas for discussion and reporting back from the legislature and the trade. So I'm seeing a list here on what I think is your page 2. That seems like a good pile of discussion points. Do you think if we go down to your questions on your page 4, are we going to be, is that summarizing or additional to the information and your thoughts?
I think we're too early on page 4. I think if we stay on page 2 and maybe start with these questions: current and ongoing concerns with hybrid access to municipal meetings, and then the trade-offs, acknowledging what the trade-offs are for hybrid meetings. And then what do we need for best practices for hybrid access to municipal meetings? And it sounds like we need to make sure we define what a hybrid meeting is as well. It's to me, again, having been in that, it seems obvious, but it's not obvious, right? So maybe that's just where we start, is define what is that, what are people meaning by a hybrid meeting?
Well, under the open meeting law, I mean, my understanding of a hybrid meeting matches what you described insofar as under the open meeting law, members need to hear and be heard by everyone who's participating in the meeting.
At a minimum audio. Not video, at a minimum audio. I'm interrupting.
Sorry, so I'm gonna back up. That agreed that an option to just watch a meeting without the ability to participate in that meeting directly, which would include, yes, absolutely minimum audio to be able to express your opinion on the matters considered by the body, which is an entitlement in the open meeting law for members of the public. You need to have that interaction element. That's essential. Or the ability to interact. You don't have to, not every person has to interact, but every person has to have the ability to be able to speak, right? And it's within the parameters of the meeting procedure, so reasonable expectations and so forth. But yeah, and I think you think about what the legislature's live streams are the example of the other format that I'm considering not a hybrid meeting, right? They put they put it up on YouTube, everybody can watch it, but you're not able to testify from that YouTube station. You have to be invited to testify, and that's not an open meeting law discussion, but we're within the open meeting law where with hybrid meetings, that's a requirement. That's my view based on the legalities of it. We might want to come up with cleaner language than that rambling analysis. But I do think the interactive portion for public participation is essential to comply with the law.
Inclusion again.
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem clear to everyone else? Is there more to add to that?
I guess I'm going to add one more thing, which is the spaces in which you meet, right? A hybrid meeting would require, under the open meeting law, a physical location. Staffed, I think that's still in there, staffed by a physical staffed location, designated staffed location where public can attend and participate. And you would also need to have the electronic access, which includes telephone access. That's statutory language as well. So you need to have at least 2 locations, one of those being electronic, one of those being physical.
And when you say includes telephone, does that mean telephone could cover it? I'm pretty sure it does, but I just want to be clear. And certainly one of the techniques that I've seen used is to have the visual access, the one that we were just talking about, the CCTV one that's not interactive, have that exist so that I can be sitting at home and I can be watching the meeting, but then have the ability to call into the meeting. And that, so it would only be audio in terms of the participation, but the CCTV would enrich my understanding of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I put must include telephone call-in access by a landline. And so I haven't had this experience. So this would be something to test. I feel like I haven't called into a meeting except using a cell phone that allows me to punch in a bunch of code numbers. So I don't know what the difference is there, but I also see Kate's hand raised, and I know we're following.
So also just listed there the wording hear and be heard by participants. To truly make it universal, I think that it would need to include a way for public comment to be provided written that could be read aloud by a moderator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there something else besides hear and be heard other than members need to be able to participate?
The here and be
And
heard
then-
language comes directly from the text of the statute, and it's
Okay.
specified at members of the public body who are participating electronically need to be able to hear and be heard. So the idea is you can't, you can't be joining a meeting by, say, email or some other medium. You have to, at bare minimum, be able to hear all participants and be heard by all participants. And that's just for members participating electronically as per the statute. I want to be careful here, though, when we're defining a hybrid meeting, because I think there's like the legal elements that are required, and then there's what we're recommending. And I think we just want to, and I think while we're talking about it, we're juxtaposing all those, and that's fine. We just want to make sure when we break it down, there is going to be, this is non-negotiable. This is what's in the law right now, but this is what we're saying is needed. This is what we're saying we should be considering as the baseline for a hybrid meeting.
And
What are we
Can I
doing right
make-
here with this paragraph? Is this existing law or is this the wish list?
Well, we've got call in by landline. That's not existing law. I'm looking at this. Members need to hear and be heard. That statute, allows participation according to participants' role in the meeting. I think that's implied
again,
by
we
the
could
law.
leave
It's not
that
explicit in
to
the
you.
law. Yeah.
We
Yeah,
could leave
yeah,
that
yeah.
to you and or
Yeah, absolutely.
lawyers to, I think this was just sort of here amongst us. Do we all,
Yeah,
have a
Yeah.
general understanding of what a hybrid meeting is? And
sure.
I would add some language in between, and a virtual platform that it's fuzzy here, it goes in and out, allows two-way audio and or video electronic access. So that's back and forth.
And I don't want to get mired down in this, like we're trying to hardwire a definition right here. I think we're trying to make sure we're level setting, so we're all talking about the same thing. But I don't think that we have to lock this down right here, right now, for the purposes of this discussion, if that makes
Electronic
sense.
access is big.
Yeah.
You're talking about audio and video.
And Andy, did you have your hand up?
I did. I found something that actually referenced that speakerphone or Skype for audio participation was compliant with the open meeting law. So we weren't going beyond that. But then I realized that this was on the Cannabis Control Board site. It's not necessarily Secretary of State or elections guidance, but it is a Vermont.gov site. So make of it what you will.
so we
What
want to
is
put
it?
that
Their
in
legal
suggestion.
counsel used to be
And Frank, to Frank's
hours.
point, I think that when we get down to best practices for hybrid access, we could get into sort of the differences, what the temperamental and kind of emotional, I'm lacking word, differences between webinar participation and meeting participation. So where would it be best that you see everybody else who's on the meeting? And where is it acceptable that a municipality has only the members of the body, the select board say, visible and everybody else hidden? And that, again, is getting into the weeds, but I think has to do with best practices and probably would not be in the definition.
And the goal that's listed there about not overtaxing meeting leaders, is that where does that goal language come from?
I made it up. What I was and what I was trying to do there was create, and maybe taxing is the wrong word, but what I was trying to do was talk about the sort of two poles that we're talking about, and it was essentially the ones that Jenny mentioned earlier. How do we support and include everyone, and also acknowledge that that calls on resources and that creates attention? And it's kind of along the lines of what we were talking about earlier. We are focusing very directly right now on the needs of the participants, and that's super important. And I fully endorse it. And I also know that our municipalities are funded by tax dollars and they are staffed largely by volunteers. And we need to acknowledge that there are going to be limitations to what we can provide. And so how can we be most efficient in providing these needs? How can we be most welcoming while we are also recognizing that there's only so much that we can do.
And I guess maybe as one of the only people here who's been denied access, as also a volunteer voter, denied access to voting year after year after year, and public meetings, along with all of my peers, I want to be really careful that we're not ceding the authority and the focus of this group before we even make recommendations. So if the purpose of this meeting is to ensure best practices for universal access, I would really hate for us to see hedging language that cuts at that from the get-go.
I agree.
So Kate, so I appreciate that. I think one of the things that when Susan and I met, and it was just Susan and I coming up with these frames for everybody to respond to. And my, if I were to be in charge of the world, it would be like, come on, people, get on board. You know what I mean? Like, what an opportunity. I hear, you know what I mean? What an opportunity to connect with one another and to grow by embracing the most, the broadest accessibility standards and putting our resources, putting our money towards that. If we could, it would be great to hear that, to get into this and like, let's get into what the pluses and minuses are, if we dare. And then we can then move forward, having acknowledged our own, we can move forward with making recommendations. So does that make some sense, or you would rather not even have pluses and minuses?
I really want to push back about this two sidesism on this, right? Because on one hand, there's paid people to do elections and to provide access. And on the other hand, there's people who've been begging for access for their entire lives and aren't getting it. So there's no two sides to this, right? This is what we are charged with, to be able to make this more accessible. And honestly, none of what we're talking about is revolutionary. Like, most states have figured this out, right? And so, like, I don't want to act like what we're like, the ideal is this like panacea that would cost $1 bajillion, because it literally wouldn't. It would be a free website, maybe a couple $1,000s to like post it. Like, it's not, I just really want to be careful that we're not going into this with internalized ableism and other isms as our framing point.
I see Sean's hand up. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can, if I could just be quick on that. I think as Susan noted, with whether or not the overtaxing is the right word or set up, or, plus or minus, or the one or two, but the way I see it, or one possibility, what I think the group, and I wasn't part of the group of that language, but with the not overtaxing leaders isn't like it's not like an either or necessarily, because I think even with our work as this committee is to try to set up the structures or the broader supports, or whether they be financial or pieces from the state, or whether they be best practices or whatever they can. So I think even if the expectation is to be at an optimal level, how you get there, whether it's all put on a local leader in the town, or whether it's put on the expectation that the group or other resources, best practices, things are going to be brought to bear to make it easier for those local leaders to hit that top level. That's how I inferred that line in reading it.
And Susan, you go next, and then I'm going to jump in because I want to. Well, actually, yeah, Susan, you go ahead and respond.
Sure. Yeah. As a meeting facilitator, I really resisted the pluses and minuses framing as well, because I don't think it's useful. I think it pits us against each other, us being the world. And there are way better ways to do this. And in fact, I suggested a process that we could use to flesh out the benefits and what could be termed the over-reliance on some of the values that we're leaning in here. And Kate, I definitely hear your concerns. And I also just want to be sure that we are understanding that I think everyone is here with goodwill. And these are, I think to talk about, seeding ground is not the way we want to be framing this. We want to be framing it as both and. We want to be framing it as if there are things that are hard for existing resources to fulfill, then how can we get the resources to fulfill them? Not pretend that those aren't hard, not pretend that we aren't talking about already overtaxed volunteers. How can we broaden the mindset of the volunteers? Certainly that's going to be necessary. And also, how can we give resources to the volunteers? And part of framing this is also not just pointing the finger at municipal officials, but also empowering citizens of all, residents of all stripes to be able to say, hey, here are best practices that I could help moderate and facilitate and bring to my town. I can go to my select board and say, I know you guys are super busy. Can I help? And here's a list of best practices that I can pitch it on, so that we can raise all boats.
Thanks, Susan. And that a lot of that was what I was going to mention. I think there isn't a line necessarily too between those who are in the meeting official role and those who are the members of the public role, because we're hoping that that's going to be a flow and that members of the public are going to be empowered to become officials as well, and opening that to a broader group of people. But I want to point back though to this particular guide, this particular element that we're discussing today. The best practice that we're recommending is exclusively for technical assistance, equipment training for public meetings. So this piece, and we're going to be talking about meetings of the voters in many places elsewhere. And in fact, the next topic that we'll be doing is a guide for accessibility for polling and public meeting locations. So it's going to include the polling, the voting locations. But this particular piece is looking at what tech assistance, equipment, and training do towns need to be able to do all this stuff that we're hoping that they will be able to do. And so I want to focus in on that public meeting element as opposed to for this purposes of this conversation, as opposed to broadening out to also meetings of the voters. Yes, Frank.
Andy, could you share your letter that you sent to me? Because I think it pretty much encompassed all the challenges of that Jenny was just talking about.
Yeah, I'll forward that to Jenny to be included in the record and shared with the group.
Thank you. Yeah. So I guess, and within that charge, right, that we're identifying what help towns need. It's going to be difficult to talk about what help they need if we aren't able to talk about what's not working right now. And I hear you that the framing here is not helpful, and I think we have to figure out a way though to be able to identify what, if we're working from a place where we're assuming it's not working for everyone right now, which we know it's not, then we're going to have to figure out some ways to be saying what it is we're trying to assist when we're saying this is the assistance we need, this is the equipment we need, this is the training we need.
Yeah, and I just threw like a sample reframe, right? Like for what the goal is in the chat. So I put goal, instead of goal is to improve accessibility and transparency while not compromising meeting quality or overtaxing leaders or participants, I wrote goal is to recommend equipment to improve accessibility and transparency.
Yeah. And Susan, I think you could leave it. I just put those two down. And I want to be really clear that these notes are for our internal review. And I would not stand behind like me personally, I would not say I want to present a roll of pluses and minuses. I would want us to, for example, like this one, or distractions of remote participants, right? That is a universal experience that I think many of us could have, right? Like for me, the introduction with COVID of remote meetings means I'm having back-to-back meetings. I don't have any time between meetings. It's ridiculous. It's exhausting. And my tendency to start checking email and trying to multitask. And this happens with select board members as well. When somebody is on public comment, they start reading their emails or texting to, and that would be something we would want to put in a best practices guide, is facilitation that encourages people to focus on what is happening in the room. So this is not meant to be specifically pluses and minuses around resources or accessibility for people with specific needs.
I noticed Laura's had her hand up for a while. Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Susan said about, remembering that, this, I think that there are a lot of people who, clerks and board members that want this guidance, that don't know what to do, that this accessibility questions or transparency questions are put to them and they don't know how to answer them. They just haven't been given the tools. Or so anyway, I just wanted to say that I think there are a lot of people, and just in my experience, it's like one clerk wants to do this and then someone else wants to do that, and they can't agree because it's not written for them on how they're supposed to approach an issue. And so anyway, I think I don't see this as adversarial as much as really help providing everybody involved with some solutions that they all want on either side, if there are sides.
Megan, is that a new hand?
Oh, sorry. Did I not take my hand down? I can't see myself anymore.
It's still up. So
would it be useful to go through these? Did I take it down now? I can't remember. I can't even see where it is.
I think it would be useful.
I mean, this current and ongoing concerns and trade-offs are sort of the same thing. And it may be useful just to have folks say what those are. And, I'm going to, again, reiterate that maybe we don't need to spend much time there. Maybe everybody's ready to move into best practices because we have a kind of general shared understanding that we love. We are in love with hybrid access to meetings, and we want to spread the gospel. We may not be ready to share a recommendation to make it legal or mandated, but or maybe we do, but maybe we skip this first part and we just move into best practices. I would defer to the group.
Frank, what did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, because we're talking about the technical side, but we also need to bring into the discussion the people side, because like in our planning commission, we had somebody that could do whiz bang things on the screen like this. And when that person couldn't be at the meeting, was chairing the meeting, you couldn't have the meeting in the same way. So you have redundancy issues in the labor side as well as equipment sides.
Right. And our charge is technical assistance, equipment, and training. And I think the training piece there, it speaks to what you're bringing up. Susan has her hand up. Oh, thanks. Susan?
Yeah, yes. We actually did our town meeting. I think I've mentioned this before. For 12 years, we did it offering remote town meeting participation. So I'm a big fan of offering that. And I would also say, to Megan's point about being in love with hybrid meetings, as a meeting facilitator, I can tell, I mean, I know that hybrid meetings are the gold standard for accessibility, and I 100% support that. And I also know that they are whatever the opposite is of the gold standard for deliberative democracy. They're the, like, you know, poop standard, you know, like as a facilitator, I would much rather facilitate, and I know this is universally true, easier to facilitate an all online meeting or an all in-person meeting. A hybrid meeting is the hardest kind of meeting to do well for the people online and for the people in the room. And so to say that I'm in love with hybrid meetings, it's like I'm half in love with hybrid meetings. And so I don't want to underplay the need for facilitation training, for understanding the value of quality deliberation. It's not just report. It's not just, I got to say something, you know, I got to put out words. There's connection that happens. There's community building that happens. There's understanding that happens when we see each other, and understand the experience that we're having. Our communities are small, and the community building aspect of a really well-run meeting should not be underplayed. It is what makes Vermont, Vermont. It's what builds social capital. And I want everyone to have access to that. And so I guess I just want to be clear that that's a hurdle, that as we bring hybrid meetings up as a gold standard, we also need to understand that that element of it as well.
I agree, Susan. 100%. And I just want to apologize to the group that I'm late. My day did not go as anticipated. Lots of pots juggling, so I apologize. And it sounds like you guys are having a great conversation.
I think that you brought up one of the, I'm talking to Lauren, that at the training session in Rutland, that there were some meetings around Vermont, and one in Poultney. I was informed by one of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission members who lives in Poultney, where there was vulgarities introduced to the meeting, intentionally disruptive to the meeting, with no intention of contributing at all to the meeting, to show up there. And so the question becomes, is it possible to set the text so that that can be filtered out ahead of time, where it doesn't even get into the general discourse or to the record? Because it's a big problem getting it out of the record, to edit it out, and that's being dealt with, as Lauren is.
Well, that's in a bill, yeah. It is a problem, but it's a problem. It has been a problem in a traditionally all public meeting in person as well. So, but just with technology documenting it and keeping it forever for the duration of time, potentially, or for a month, the legislature tried to tackle that by allowing redaction for certain specific purposes, but it's very specific.
But if there's something in the tech where you could ferret it out ahead of time, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a tech ability to do that, but yes.
So we are on here on the current and ongoing concerns. Did we have anything else we want to add to that part before moving on down the list here?
As I'm taking notes on this, which you may or may not find helpful, for Frank to bring that up allows us to put into the current and ongoing concerns, or the trade-offs allow us to move into best practices for hybrid access to municipal meetings. And I wonder, also similarly, you mentioned, Susan, social capital by being in person, which I think is complicated I think there's a flip side to that too, that the kind of insular, you know that, but it could be that we need to say in a best practice for hybrid access to municipal meetings, maybe that town officials or community members need to become aware of, need to be aware of the impact of technology on their participation. So I'll give an example. The neighborhood planning assemblies in Burlington, which are community meetings where people gather to discuss various elements, often start with a dinner before the meeting portion, so that people can have that social capital meeting place. And then they move into the business portion of the meeting. And those who want to socialize and meet and feel comfortable can do so in one format. And then those who want to be there for the business of the meeting. So as we come up with the tensions, we can move into making some best practices, responses to those tensions.
Mhm. So with that, do we want to move into the list of best practices that you have here and sort of work through those and see if we want to add anything or elaborate on anything?
Well, I guess, are there other things that people want to say on the concerns or, for lack of better term, trade-offs?
Right.
I think the VLCT would like us to have expense listed on here.
Is cost was the first one on the list.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Or
gotcha.
unless
yeah.
expense costs.
No, that's
concerns.
fine. No,
Okay.
that's what it is. I was scrolled down too far. I didn't see that paragraph.
That's okay.
Very good.
Mhm.
Laura.
I mean, I don't know if this is the right place for it, but it means for alternative forms of communication, because visual and audio may not. Good visuals, good audios, good alternate means of communication, I think, for people who, can neither see or hear or speak. Written. Part of what something that came up earlier was like in the sort of like ability to hear and be heard. Was nothing really in there that talks or addresses the issues of people who can only communicate by alternative means, and so
Inclusive.
inclusive.
Do you have Laura, any examples of that might be helpful to put into?
Well, like braille to speech might be one. Oh, well, I guess that provides for hearing, but or braille to text to speech, or yeah, I mean, I'd have to think a little bit more about what those sort of peripheral communication devices might be, but that not using one myself, I'm not exactly familiar, but
One question that I have is just like, who is the definer of the things? And the default continues to be the town clerk or the select board members. And I know that like this is not a place really for examples, but I'm constantly thinking of the examples me and my peers have experienced. And so I just want to give one. This was a city, a large city. Like this was like one of the top largest cities in Vermont. So this is not a resource issue. 2 years into COVID, there was a group of community activists who wanted to share public comment at a city council meeting for something that they cared deeply about. They showed up, there were like 15 people at public comment, amazing. Guess who didn't like it? The select board members. They did not want to hear from 15 people about that issue, concerned about it. And so one of the city council members had said during that meeting that the meeting quality was very bad, and they looked forward to all of these rules ending that required hybrid because they, quote, couldn't wait for those same people to be there in person, look them in the eye and make that comment. Like it was, so I just want to be really careful when we talk about meeting quality, that it is not defined by the systems that are making things inaccessible.
We're talking about sausage making.
I'm not sure how to put that in the notes, Kate. Maybe if there's
So
a
it was
way.
just, yeah, it was just a reaction to, so Susan had some, like, generally, yes, I agree with the offer of the wording that acknowledges inherent tensions. And Susan wrote, goal is to improve accessibility and transparency while maintaining meeting quality and adequately resourcing communities to do so. Like, whenever we put in a caveat, the question then becomes who defines that caveat? And I will tell you time and time again, I know who's going to define that caveat, and it's not going to be the people who want access to meetings.
We hear that concern quite a bit here at the Secretary of State's office. And I want to just acknowledge that that is a deep concern. And people feel this way, particularly around public comment. And I think that when there are guardrails put up about the length of public comment, how whether duplicative, whether people can say the same thing, all of those things, I think we really need to be thinking about. The unfortunate thing is somebody needs to define it. Usually it is the public body, and we can challenge that and explore that, Kate. But I also think, but they are accountable to the people that they serve and to the people of the public, so they should be responsive. I go back to something that was stated at one of our initial meetings. I just think the rules of the road need to be explained very clearly to everybody at the beginning of a meeting, so that people who are waiting to participate in public comment are not caught unaware. You know, I see that a lot, or are feel like they've done something wrong because they haven't followed the rules of the road. And I think good public bodies sort of read the room about whether their rules are reasonable, and should be doing that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And just to be clear, this was an example where all rules of public comment were 100% followed. The city council members were just very angry that people had the audacity to be able to join online and share a public comment when they should have been sitting in front of them under their scrutiny.
Yeah, well, that doesn't sound at all appropriate, nor does it sound responsive to the concerns that are in front of them. But
that intimidation happens in small towns and with so-called able-bodied people as well. And it's who you have in leadership, and what the flavor of that leadership is going to determine how inclusive it's going to be. And that seems like that's the elephant in the room. You can make all the rules you want in the world, but whether or not they're willing to follow them is something quite completely different. And we have a very divisive time right now that's pushing in the wrong direction.
I see a couple more hands up. Is it Susan's next on here, and then Frank?
Yeah, I just want to point out that I think that in our duties, We've talked about recommending best practices for, and what we're talking about right now is hybrid meetings. But I think there's another thing that we're going to be doing, I hope, which is running effective, what we're saying of running effective and inclusive meetings. So there's a whole wonderful school of thought and training and research on addressing the kinds of issues that we're talking about right now. And they don't have anything to do with hybrid meetings. They have to do with how human beings interact and how to set up a meeting that's well facilitated. So that's a separate question that I think that we're going to be, I hope, addressing in an additional part of this group's work.
Yes, and just to respond to that, our first charge in here is to recommend best practices for running effective inclusive meetings, maximizing participation and accessibility in electronic, hybrid, in-person, annual meetings of public bodies. So, and I think that is something that is running through, it's a through line through all of the work we're doing here. But that is specific charge to us as well. So, and we can tease out here what tech help is needed to make the remote and hybrid meetings happen. But we're going to have to take a step back for sure to hit that. And I think talk about meeting facilitation and meetings in general before you really are touching on how that changes when you add an additional electronic or hybrid element. No, Frank's up.
Of interest is that our select board, we have had a lot of activity. And there's a statement that the chair reads at the start of the meeting saying that this meeting is essentially, I'm paraphrasing, is a business meeting of the select board, which the public is party to, but is not, it's not the purpose of the meeting, is just to have the public there. And then the public's invited to participate, essentially. But the reminder is the purpose of the meeting is to do the business of the town. And so that phrase, I was looking for it on a video to forward over to you to see what is read at the start of every meeting. It might be posted on our website too.
So my understanding about that language is that it derives from model rules put forth by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, which is a member organization for their municipalities. And that is a position that they've articulated now and again, saying, look, they tell their board members, their members, that meetings are meetings of the public body, and it is for the town, right? But it's the meeting, the point they're trying to make is that the business needs to be able to be conducted.
Right, which makes a wonderful skeleton for us to expand on.
And I think the tension there, of course, is with the needs for folks in the town or whoever's attending to have their needs met, to express their views, and to be able to contribute to the conversation in meaningful ways. Which
is the public meeting requirements section on the agenda, but they can limit the time frame of that. To a reasonable time frame.
There hasn't been anything that says that they can't limit it.
Yeah.
Very lawyerly way of putting it. Yes.
And, I think part of this too is the supposition and understanding that the majority of our public bodies have elected members who are supposed to be representing the public. So they're representing the public during the course of the business of the body at all times. But that doesn't, of course, mean that they shouldn't be accountable to the public as well, either on an individual level outside of the meeting or in the meeting collectively. So there's a couple of, talking about tensions, there's a couple of tensions there that are worth noting.
Is everybody familiar with that language? That might be a good thing to send out.
I think that language comes from the League of Cities and Towns. I think it's one perspective. It's one way of framing it. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with adopting that as our way, but it's something we can consider as we're working through this.
Then we're going to alter that situation with a whole new paradigm when it comes to the meetings with this report. Then.
Well, I don't think we have the power to alter anything. Quite frankly,
the legislature would
possibly, but I think we can talk about that in our report. That is commonly happening, and that there is this tension, and that if there was clarity, that could be helpful. But I don't know whether, I mean, the reality is statutes, you need to be very general, very big, cover everybody. And the advice that the league is giving is for a specific type of body too. So, but there are other public bodies that would not cover state ones, for example. So, Megan. Megan, did you want to say something?
I was muted and I'm unmuted and muted again. So I apologize. I have to leave the meeting. I have to be somewhere for 12:15 and I miscalculated the time. I think there's more to be done on this. Certainly, you all have the link to this document. And we could get into, I just want to reiterate again that this page, this hybrid meeting setup options is really very draft, very early draft. So please, it was to show options for how we might present some information in a way that was not intimidating. And again, can give some guidelines for a potential grant that might be part of the request. I know that the original Act 133 had some grant funding in it to do this work, and I would encourage us to think about that also. But please don't use these as they are. And then I would love to get into these questions a little bit more, but I don't think we're ready to do that today. And I apologize that I need to leave. And
I just want to add that Megan has, speaking of intimidating, Megan has even more information that she has is brainstorming onto a spreadsheet. So when it comes time, there's even more. There's more.
If Megan's still here, I really want to thank both Megan and Susan for this document. It is a really nice collection of ideas around the junction between technology and various meeting sizes across Vermont. Thank you so much.
So we have about 20 more minutes, a little more than. We've been sort of mixing together all of the different elements we broke out on the agenda and been going with the breakdown in this document, which I think was a really good way to go because it hits on all of these points. I'm wondering, do we want to? I know Megan said that she thought maybe we weren't even ready for the questions for discussion here. I'm wondering if we want to take a look at, on this document, the list of items as a starting place for best practice suggestions and work through these and think about whether we want to add to any of these or what other spaces we want to be, addressing here. And I'm seeing it's broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 12-ish items listed. Does everyone have access that they can see this list? It's up here still, isn't it? Yeah.
It's about to not be up here because I'm sharing it. So you may want to share it.
So you're still here, Megan. Okay.
I am still here, and I
got you. Let me see if I can figure out how to share it.
I hate leaving you all at this time because this is exactly what I want to be here for. And I look forward
This will not be the last time we talk about it, Megan. We're going to talk about this is like the thread that connects every meeting. So there's more.
And I'm trying to figure out how to.
But so I'm going to stop sharing so that you can then go ahead and share it yourself.
See if
And
I can get that to make that happen here.
Kate, this was my first time meeting you. It's great to meet you. I really appreciate everything you have to say. And Laura, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megan.
And others. Okay, take care.
Here it is. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have a sense of how to get the document that she shared in the chat up there?
Yeah, you
Yes,
just
click
click
on
on it.
Right.
Is it open on your screen?
Yeah. Wait, see, that's it. Keep going to. Sorry, y'all.
If the document is open, then it's easy to do.
Okay, let's see if I can get back into it because it's wanting me to sign. Let's see. The alternate is that we can just talk through each item, but that's not ideal.
Kelly, do you have the document open by any chance?
Are you able to
Yeah,
share it?
I do now. I can try sharing my screen and share from there.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, give me just a second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cynthia, for being here. Oh, she left already.
How's that for everybody?
Got it.
We can see
Thank
it.
you.
Okay. Where do you want me to scroll to exactly?
I was thinking the list of best practice suggestions. I think it's page 2.
Right there.
There we are.
Right
What do we
there.
need for best practices for hybrid access to municipal meetings? And this was the one that Megan and Susan and Frank put together. And do we want to take a moment to just read through it, or would it be helpful for me to read it?
We've
Or should
sort
we
of
just start one
been
by
editing it as we go here. I know that
Okay.
things have been being added as we've been talking about
Sure.
this.
Kelly, are you
right? Do you want me
comfortable
to
with this?
officially? Yeah. Do you want
Would
me
you
to
be
be
able
editing?
to drop that in there? Yes, or just adding in, jotting down notes on there would be very helpful.
Okay.
So the first thing we have on here is good visuals, right? As for this, and we're specifically talking about just hybrid, not remote only. Good visuals. Can the speakers be identified? This may include stating names for visually impaired or phone participants. Also good practice for keeping a record of a meeting because you need to have that in the minutes anyway. I think there's going to be a piece in here about dealing with the people in the room, being able to see the people on the screen and all the people on the screen and the people on the screens being able to see all the people in the rooms, right? I mean, it's not just identifying so much as that interactive element that Susan was talking about, like the actual act of being able to see and connect with people, and then the feeling of connection that you're able to build, and how you can use your visuals to be part of that. And I don't have an answer for that or the audio question in terms of I don't know what technical tools are out there that would be the gold standard. And it probably varies the type of room you're using too, as well, right? I mean, an auditorium is not the same as a.
Are we just offering
Small.
suggestions in this shared thing? Because I mean, the 508 stuff is fantastic. Like, and as Laura has shared previously, like it is not possible to start listing exhaustive things, because the moment you do, you're gonna not have everything. But like, for example, sharing everything in advance, electronically and printed, making sure that it is in accessible font, making sure that the colors used are appropriate. If it is electronic, making sure that it's going to be compatible with screen readers, making sure that all images have accessible alt text, right? Like there's a whole lot that like it really, I don't even know that going down this, it's gonna exclude and will never be possible to capture all of it. But the basics of things like sharing everything in advance, virtually, electronically, and print, right? Following the 508 provisions, making sure that, yeah, I mean, there's just so much. And I just wanted to share, like, because I don't know if this is part of it, but like, you know, it feels a lot because hybrid meetings it is our world, and that is where things happen. And virtual meetings, like, it's a little bit akin to me of like putting out there like best practices for like the pros and cons of including wheelchair ramps, right? Which is one of the more popular accessibility standards. And so I just, you know, there's going to be a lot of select board people who are going to be like, ooh, we have a really nice building and the wheelchair ramp is going to make it look ugly, right? So it's, again, I just want to, it's who is defining the thing, right? It always needs to come back to who is defining the opt-out caveat. And with the list of items, which is great, love the infographic. I would love to see in a best practice guide that number 1 is just removed completely, because I don't even agree with the fact that it would be the simplest setup, and I don't think anything about it is part of the best practice. Reasons.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I know, and I want to acknowledge that the list is going to be limiting. I think it's maybe in the way I was looking at it was a springboard for sort of trying to find the bigger categories of practices that we want to address. And one that you just mentioned that has many nuances and many small items you could list under it is the advance delivery of information. The advance, you know, the meeting setup piece, you know, and that's a big chunk that isn't on this list, I think, already. It's going to be, it's super important, right? And you could drill down and try to list everything out of that. I don't think that's where we're going, but I think to try to identify some of the bigger overarching goals here, it would be useful.
I just want to say I'm jumping in and catching up, so I don't know what number 1 is, if it's a recommended setup or not, or if it's
Brainstorming.
Okay. I will say I agree with you, Kate. Number 1 is not good for a whole bunch of people. Video is also not good for a whole bunch of people because they don't have internet access. So there needs to be in any meeting the way to join in with only a phone. And whoever is facilitating needs to understand that there could be people who cannot see the materials, cannot see who's talking, and are appearing just on phone. And to your point, that's why materials should be provided beforehand or posted in a public location. So but I don't understand if one was a recommendation for how to set up a meeting or not. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Raise my hand. Sorry.
Susan? Oh, no, who's up?
Laura has her hand up. Gotcha. Technically.
Laura,
Sorry.
yeah, okay.
It was just an old school hand. We liked it.
Sorry, I had an old school hand up. I do think that maybe best practices, it can be an evolving list. I think we've talked a lot about them for the last little while and trying to redefine them. But, you know, moving into the issue, the sort of the next section about whether or not one is functional, I think stepping back and looking at, you know, a more big picture, like what means are we already using, what's readily available, like understanding what is being used, if anything, for those that are doing hybrids, how easy it would be to make those all readily available forms available throughout the state. And then, you know, and then beyond what's readily available, things that are, you know, available with minimum expense or minimum, you know, confusion, whatever those barriers are. And then talking about what else is available that we haven't considered, like what provider premises equipment, you know, it will be needed, what are we helping to provide customer premises equipment, like, you know, in-home, you know, devices for people to be able to communicate, or, you know, what telecommunications options are already available to us. And then things like you know, I mentioned before, like Braille translators, like other additional equipments. But I think maybe just kind of getting a general sense of what we already have, what's already been in use, and then kind of breaking down from there whether or not that is something that can be mandated for everybody to use from the beginning, from the, pre-meeting communications. And like Kate has suggested, websites, how easily would it be for, every town to have a website that communicates in advance? And so anyway, I mean, I think just kind of stepping, and then we might be more better advised once we've looked at what's available in terms of technology as to what our best practices might be.
Reverse engineering.
Yeah, and Laura, I think I just want to respond. We are asked all the time, what is required? Like, people call us wanting us to determine whether someone is complying or not with accessibility standards, which is very tricky. I think it's just very tricky because, and I want to be careful that we're not skirting around, like that we are clear as a group what should be required versus what is best practices. Because I think there's a lot of public bodies that aren't doing what's required. And that's a problem. And I don't want our best practices guides to be used as an excuse for what's not being, what is not actively happening. I think that's probably as clear as my thoughts can articulate right now, but I just worry. I think we have to really grapple with that as a group, because there's a lot of instances that I can think about that we have heard about where public bodies are not accessible, and legally they should be doing something different. Our office cannot tell them that. That is not our role. But if we put a bunch of things that are legally required, should be legally required into best practices, then people could use that as, well, that's best practice. We don't actually have to do it. And I worry about that.
When you have the legally required, then you have all of a sudden something technology wise fails, then the meeting would have to be suspended. You go immediately. You wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't be able to continue the meeting because you're not following the law.
Well, I just come back to the example of a handicap accessible entrance to the building. We would never put that in a best practices guideline. It's not a best practice. It's legally required.
No.
And so I just want to be careful that we are clear as a group what's legally required versus what it would be good. So I don't know, it's a Braille, I'm going to get the words wrong, Laura, because I don't, this isn't my world, but is the text to Braille reader legally required, or is it best practices? And that's what people ask us. I'm sure that's what people ask you, but if it's a best practice and not legally required, then okay. But if it's legally required, then we should be clear about that.
Right. Understood. And that's sort of why I was saying maybe we should look at what all is available.
Yeah.
And then make the decision as to whether or not we think that's something that should be legally required, or if it's if it's a best practice goal, like just to, like I said, we've got a list of things we think right now might be best practices, but maybe if we look deeper at the possibilities of what should be legally required, then we might, just in terms of tech and hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
But
And this is all developing and unknown in some regards too. So, Susan.
Yeah, I just want to back up what Laura is saying about the idea, like phone being number one. It's not best practice, but it is a practice, and it is in many towns the starting point. It is where we are, and so what's useful, and we did some of this, I think, in the spreadsheet, is it's like, okay, here's a starting point, and then say, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this tool? Like phone has, hey, it's easy. Most people have one. It's cheap. Hey, you can't see anybody. It kind of has a crappy meeting quality, and it helps a town sort of say, oh, well, that's where we are. But boy, there are a lot of minuses to this. Helps bring them to the point that they want to take the next step. And so by outlining those steps and the sort of the work that needs to be done to get there helps not only, I think, the municipal leaders, but also people within the town. By offering those best practices, it offers them a tool, guidelines to say, oh, here's the next thing that our town could do to make our town even more welcoming and accessible. You know, again, I just want to come back to this. I really think that the pros and cons list is there's an important there are important tensions and trade-offs that need to be, I think, in our conversation. And I don't think pros and cons are the best way to do it, but I don't think we can only talk about the pros, because we need to know what we're up against so that we can address so that we really can have the both and. Otherwise, we're just going to be kind of, you know, yelling at the wind. We need to be able to identify the tensions within so that we can move forward.
This might be a good moment to start wrapping up.
I think so.
Because I think all of us have probably commitments at 12:30. Did you guys go over the next meeting, Jenny?
We just talked briefly that the next step is our planning for the accessibility guide, but I think we're continuing this conversation as well, as part of that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Does everyone have, we have a current accessibility guide for voting locations,
right?
Yeah. And our mission is to create that for voting locations or all public bodies.
Our mission is to produce a guide for accessibility for polling and public meeting locations. So
yeah,
including voting, but not limited to.
Okay. Does everyone have the current accessibility at voting locations? Access to that? Okay. We'll make sure that that's sent to everybody before the meeting, speaking of providing materials before the meeting, so that everyone can have an opportunity to look at it. Because I think, as Jenny said, that's going to be a continuation of the conversation that we're having, but we should be looking at what is previously provided, building on that, I think. Does that sound good to you guys, to everyone? Yes.
Is Kate going to be coming to all the meetings now? Kate, are you in? Good.
Yeah. Yay. we need Kate and Laura for sure.
Or Lindsay, because I'm not really sure if it's me or Lindsay.
Well, we'll take whoever we get. Yeah, we love the voice. We need the perspective. So
yes, and thank you everyone for contributing to this. I don't think it was an easy conversation at every point today, and I think everyone brought a lot and put a lot out there.
I also am kind of curious about the town clerks as a constituency that we still haven't had in attendance at any of these meetings.
Yes, we need them.
We had somebody that was changed over, I think, or something.
Yeah, we have some churn there, and we do need to get them here. Somebody. It's good to keep on that.
Is there
clear?
Is there a plan for that? Because we've raised it at every meeting. Is there a plan? Is there somebody I can call?
Yeah, I mean, you can call the association. I have asked, and I think just somebody hasn't been assigned. But
so as long as,
yeah, it has been requested, and this work has been on their radar. I think there's just a lot of competing priorities right now, and somebody hasn't been assigned to the work. So I will make sure that at least one of us asks again before our next meeting. But that is the issue.
Well, thank you, everybody. If that is all, we're ending a couple minutes early. And our next meeting is, where are we at? We're at June 16th, 10 o'clock.
Same Monday. We're shaking it up. I just want to say that it's very likely that I will not be here that day for that meeting, because it's the legislature's day. And we have an elections bill we're trying to move, and we're getting pulled into the education conversation. So I apologize if I'm not here. That is what is happening if I'm not here.
I guess I'm going to ask, is that going to affect the bulk of folks here, the legislature being back in session that day. Maybe Sean, yeah, okay. That doesn't seem like everybody. Okay, that's okay. All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you. When we made the plan, nobody would have thought the legislature was in session on the 16th of June, so.
Right?
You know, there's all sorts of things that are just getting a little kerfuffle. But here we are, we're rolling with it. I appreciate everyone's patience for me not being here this morning, and I'm look forward to reviewing the video and or the transcript and catching up more fully.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
What's your email? Should I have to?